Every year we hear that Virgo is a perfectionist, but the sign is so much more than that. It's mutable earth, it's mercurial, and it's the Hermit in tarot. Today I've pulled out the decks from my collection that carry those feelings, because when you match decks to these correspondences, you don't just learn about Virgo, you deepen how you read. You'll see my deck picks, but also the thought process behind them, so you can adapt this to our own practice. Let's roll right into this latest edition of my Decks for the Sign series. So Virgo is a mutable earth sign. So mutable is the modality. It means that it ends the season. So Virgo is ending the summer season. So that's that mutable aspect. And it's also an earth sign. So together, mutable earth lends the usually very sort of solid and steady element more flexibility and adaptability than is usual. And in Virgo, this can be described as a continuous process of perfection and iteration. And of course, because it's an earth sign, it's applied to the material, tangible realm. So the deck that I have picked to go along with that mutable earth signature of Virgo is the Awakening Tarot. And this kind of almost surprised me a little bit, but something about this deck, it just feels right to associate with mutable earth. I think I do consider this quite an earthy deck. It is an elemental deck in general. You can see that the suits, we've got earth, air. So the whole deck is elemental. It's supposed to represent the four elements, not just earth, but it feels quite earthy to me. I think it's to do with the illustration, just feels quite earthy. The reason I like this for mutable earth in particular is because it's kind of a spin on the existing system of tarot, because it's taking this elemental layer and bringing it to the forefront, like literally with the suit names. And I think that that kind of process of sort of kind of iterating the tarot a little bit feels like mutable earth energy. Like that feels like that mutable energy, which, like I say, is about iteration and a refinement, which is what this does. It's kind of taking the classic Rider-Waite-Smith, and it's not really changing the core meanings of the cards. It's just pulling that elemental association to the forefront. So I really like it as a kind of representation of mutable earth. This is for sure one of my favorite decks that I have added to my collection. Definitely one of my more recent favorite decks. But anyway, that is the Awakening Tarot as my mutable earth representation. Our next Virgo correspondence is its planetary ruler, and Virgo is a sign that is ruled by Mercury. And this isn't the first time we've seen Mercury in this video series. Mercury is also the ruler of Gemini. I will have the playlist for this series, as well as the Gemini video linked in the description or up in the cards if you've missed that and you want to see like another facet of Mercury. But expressed through Virgo, the Mercury rulership is kind of about depth rather than breadth. A Virgo Mercury is analyzing and organizing information, whereas a Gemini Mercury is maybe like a little bit more scattered. A Gemini Mercury can be found gathering and dispersing information. Mercury has a curious nature, and through Virgo, this becomes about details, and again that idea of refinement that I spoke about already, and kind of rigorous analysis. Virgo gets a reputation as a perfectionist, and with this kind of expression of Mercury, this like detail-oriented way of being, we can see how maybe it can tend toward overthinking, and like that's where that perfectionist stereotype can come from. So I was thinking, what deck do I have that represents Virgo and Mercury? And I thought the influence of the angels. I was looking for or trying to think of a detail-oriented deck in my collection, and I hit on this. And disclaimer, this is already a Virgo deck in my mind. I used it last year during Virgo season as my daily draw deck. So that association for me in my collection is already there. But I think this makes just a lot of sense. There are details in the cards, details in the guidebook. Everything is very carefully pulled together. This is a Rider-Waite-Smith clone. And it's a pretty cloney Rider-Waite-Smith clone, if that can make any sense. And what I mean by that is, yes, it's like a composite collage deck from like pre-existing artwork. But in a lot of the cards, you can see a lot of details that are either directly referencing something in the Rider-Waite-Smith or that are describing something about the card. And one of my favorites is the Nine of Swords in this deck that is actually right here. So like we've got our figure, we've got 9 swords that we can see. But what I love about this card is this like sad little sheep here who is, we're assuming that her lamb has died. And what I like about this is because, you know, the idea of counting sheep when you can't sleep. And so what we've got is this like tragic sheep scene, which is a little bit dark and morbid, but that is one that kind of stuck out to me when I first got this deck, the kind of first readings that I was doing. Here on Nine of Pentacles, like the setting is obviously different than we're used to seeing with the Rider-Waite-Smith. This figure is inside, she's not outside, but we've got all 9 of our coins. We've got the bird or the falcon that we would see in the Rider-Waite-Smith. So like a lot of the details are there. And then I also really like the guidebook for this one. Let's flip to actually the 9 of Pentacles, since we were just looking at that. I love this part of the entry. So in each of the card entries, we've got what symbols were included. So here, the fabrics that are shown in the image, the dog, the falcon, and then the woman, the figure herself. All of those are detailed and like laid out for you. So you can really kind of analyze these cards. It feels very Virgo. There's loads of other, you've got a direct meaning, a shadow meaning, and then because this is the influence of the angels, you've got an angelic message for each card as well. Like it's all there, it's all very methodical. It is a deck that you can read very methodically if you want to. Like there's obviously no reason you couldn't read it intuitively just based off the images. But if you wanted something to like study, or if you were studying particular symbols or like the numerology or something about the system, this is a good deck to do with that, because it does lay it all out for you. It explains why all the different choices were made and why the different parts of the images were included and what they represent. So this feels like a very Mercury deck. Also, if we think about it, the visual language, the symbolic visual symbols, that is a way of communicating meaning. And Mercury is the planet of communication. So this very kind of methodical, very detail-oriented way of communicating meaning through the symbols in the cards of this composite collage deck, it just feels very Virgo. So there we have the influence of the Angels Tarot as my Virgo Mercury deck. I like to pair an archetype with each of the signs, and for Virgo, the archetype I've chosen is that of the analyst. I've already described Virgo as analytical several times in this video, but the specific definition of an analyst that I'm working with for Virgo is somebody who is a strategic thinker, a critical thinker, somebody who is driven to understand everything. And so somebody who is, driven by curiosity, which again is a little bit that kind of Mercury peeking through, but they want to understand how things work. Virgo is associated with systems and like understanding and working within and fixing systems. So an analyst, somebody who wants to make sense of things and kind of tinker and figure out how things work. Virgo is the analyst. And the deck that I pulled for this was a little bit interesting, actually. So I ended up pulling the Thoth deck as my analyst deck. And it was a little bit of a journey to get here. I'm filming this on the first day of Virgo season, and actually 2, if not 3 of the decks that I'm showing in this video were originally something else. The Awakening Tarot was originally going to be a different deck. And this Thoth, I was originally going to pull out the New Chapter Tarot, but it just didn't feel quite right. And then I was like, you know what, why don't I just pull the Thoth? Because I always think that the New Chapter Tarot reminds me of the Thoth deck. So let's just go straight to the source. And the reason that I think the Thoth fits the archetype of the analyst for Virgo is because, well, partly because this deck can be kind of intimidating. I know I'm not the only one who was like, oh, in order to read the Thoth, I need to like study, I need to get my books, I need to get my resources, I need to learn all the different systems, the systems of correspondences within the deck, and like do all this like pre-learning before I can use the deck. At least that was my experience. I'm sure I'm not alone. And the other reason this fits my description of the analyst as the Virgo archetype is because there is such a clear, explicit internal logic to this deck. If you read any of Crowley's writing, there was a very clear internal like structure to this deck that he wanted to be represented on each of the cards. Disclaimer, I've not actually read his writing. I've read quotes from his writing within the Thoth book that I do use. And then things like the astrology are really front and center. I know the Kabbalah was a really big influence on this deck. That's not something I personally work with or look much into in my practice, but I know that that's in there in the creation of this deck. And of course, it comes from the Golden Dawn system. So all of what is explicit in this deck is still implied in, for instance, the Rider-Waite-Smith, but it's not as front and center. And I think that especially with the Pip cards, which of course I'm now not pulling any. Here we go, with the Pip cards with the minors. For instance, these three cards, we've got the Nine of Cups, the Seven of Discs, and the Ten of Wands. You can just see they look a lot more structured. They look a lot more kind of visually much more organized. That you can see that there's like repeating patterns. For instance, if you were to look at the progression of the minor suits, you can see the like addition of each extra wand and how that like changes the arrangement. I know I started out this video by saying, oh, actually Virgo doesn't have to be a perfectionist. And here I am just talking about like how organized and regimented everything is. So that makes me sound like a little bit of a hypocrite, but I think in terms of displaying the internal logic, internal structure of the deck, the Four of Discs is always one that I think of when I'm thinking about this because it's literally a square. But I think this is a good visual depiction of that kind of like analytical side of tarot because it is all front and center for you. So that is my analyst deck for Virgo. And now we move on to the tarot cards that are associated with Virgo. So the major arcana card associated with the sign is the Hermit. And then the minor arcana cards associated with Virgo are the 8, 9, and 10 of Pentacles, because Pentacles is Earth. And because Virgo is a mutable sign that ends the season, we've got the last 3 cards of the Earth sign to reference Virgo. So the Hermit, to me, the Hermit is soul searching and isolation and kind of the privacy of being in our own minds. And I think the Hermit really represents the value of solitude, the value of time on our own to reflect on the lessons that we've learned and to integrate what we've learned into our understanding of ourselves, but without outside distraction. So I wanted a deck for soul searching, which is honestly kind of a big ask. And actually, I kind of struggle with this because I would define my whole practice in general as pretty like soul searchy, definitely over the more kind of like practical or predictive types of readings. I do tend toward the more like psychological kind of journal-y, soul-searchy type of reading. But the deck that I pulled as my Hermit deck for Virgo season is the Urban Crow Oracle. There's something about the generally kind of critical and blunt nature of this deck, especially some of these cards. Like, this deck can be a little bit spiky almost. It's not a love and light rainbows and kittens, soft and fluffy kind of oracle. It's not that it's negative, but it does kind of cut a little bit closer to the bone. Something about this just felt very Virgo. And much love to all of my Virgo pals as I say this. Up until a few weeks ago, I truly believed myself to be a Virgo rising. Turns out I was lied to all this time. I was told the incorrect birth time. And then I recently found out that my birth time is actually 3.5 hours later. And so it's shifted all my houses. I'm not actually a Virgo rising, I'm a Libra rising. So I'm going to be insufferable come Libra season because I'm also a Libra sun. But I have a lot of love in my heart for what I believed to be my Virgo first house. I have some Virgo friends who I love very dearly. Please don't take it personally. But Virgos can be kind of blunt. They can be kind of blunt, and that's why we love them. But this deck also kind of blunt. It's not sugarcoating things. It's trying to get to the heart of the matter. And I think that's quite hermity. I think the whole point of the solitude of the hermit, of the isolation of the hermit, is that you've not got distractions, you've not got anything to kind of sugarcoat or soften the blow. You're just there to do the work. And that's what this deck does. This deck is one that just kind of gets on with the work, even if it's not always very pleasant or nice, it's still important and meaningful. And that is what the Urban Crow Oracle does. That's how I feel about the Hermit card for Virgo. Moving on to our minor arcana cards, we have the Eight of Pentacles, which is representative of the Sun in Virgo. And the Sun in Virgo is characterized as a sense of vitality, which is the Sun part, through being effective in the world, which is the Virgo part. I think Sun in Virgo is very good at understanding systems. You know, I said Virgo is all about systems. Sun in Virgo is good at understanding and managing and healing or fixing projects and systems. And the deck that I chose to sort of represent that is the Death Doula Oracle. So we have another oracle in this video. And the reason I went for the Death Doula for the Sun in Virgo, Eight of Pentacles association, because it doesn't seem super obvious at first, but the Sun in Virgo, or Virgo in general, likes to kind of cleanse and clear and organize. And that feels very Death Doula to me. Not necessarily just the Oracle deck itself, but the idea of a Death Doula, the idea of this kind of preparation and kind of pragmatism around death. Feels quite Virgo, feels quite Eight of Pentacles. I'm quoting from the guidebook for this here. But this deck provides the tools to take control of your experience through routine in talking about preparing for one's death, however soon or distant that might be. And this deck is all about cultivating routine to nurture your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual body. So again, systems, it's that kind of holistic view of systems as well. And just the way it's talked about, like routine several times in the introduction to this deck. Also in the guidebook, this deck provides different rituals and practices. Like it's quite a practical deck in a lot of ways. And that feels very Eight of Pentacles, because the Eight of Pentacles is about expertise, yes, and like perfecting something. And it's also about the kind of work that you do for the love of it, which also feels like the work of a death doula. That's definitely something you do as like a calling. So that fits too. Something also about the work ethic of Virgo feels like it fits this deck. Full disclosure, I don't feel like I've cracked this deck yet in my practice. I really want to work with it. I really like the themes of the deck, the kind of ideas that it's working with. I think it could be really valuable for me. So yeah, that is the Death Doula, a holistic view of different systems, and maybe healing isn't quite the right word, but like well-being. And it's also got like a practicality and a pragmatism to it, which is that kind of earthiness. I think Virgo is quite practical at heart. At its core, Virgo is practical, and then it can get a little bit in the weeds of details and trying to organize rather than like necessarily always solving problems. But that is the death doula for Sun in Virgo. Our next association is the Nine of Pentacles, which is Venus in Virgo. And this is an interesting astrological placement because Venus is, I believe, in its fall in Virgo, which just means that it's not in its most sort of easy expression, is the idea. And Venus in Virgo can be a little self-critical, so that kind of precision of Virgo, that like exacting nature, can kind of turn inwards, can be a little bit critical. Venus desires harmony and connection, and then in Virgo that is expressed through refinement. And one interpretation of the Nine of Pentacles card is material gain through diligence and through work and work ethic. And so specifically, it is this idea of success that has been grown or cultivated slowly and steadily with ongoing effort and attention. So it's that idea of like thoughtful and future-oriented allocation of resources. And all of that to say, I wanted to pick a deck that really blended form and function. So we've got that Venusian energy of like beautiful things, but we've also got that very like Virgoan energy of diligence and hard work and that kind of like slow, steady, earthy element as well. So the deck that I have chosen for that, to encompass all of that, is the Fyodor Pavlov Tarot. Several decks in this video have had gold gilded edges, which is a nice little coincidence. Anywho, the Fyodor Pavlov is form and function. It is a visually beautiful, beautiful thing. The illustrations are gorgeous. This is a beautiful deck. It's really luxe. We've got this gold foiling on the back, gold foiling on the edges. It's a beautiful linen cardstock. It feels luxurious. The artwork is beautiful, but it also works as a tarot deck. It's a really solid interpretation of the Rider-Waite-Smith. It is like a little bit altered to incorporate more diversity in the people that it represents, specifically like gender expression and sexuality. I know were important for the creator making this, but it is true to the meanings of the Rider-Waite-Smith. Like it doesn't deviate from the system, more so in just kind of how it expresses it. So this is a really usable deck. The function is very much definitely there along with the form. I think that refined is a really good word for this deck. This also may well have been one of my Taurus decks. I don't quite remember, but it does also feel very Taurus. Another earth sign. And actually, Taurus is ruled by Venus. The planetary ruler of Taurus is Venus. And I'm pulling this for my Venus in Virgo pick. So clearly, this is just a Venusian deck to my mind, obviously. There's our Eight of Pentacles. I don't know if I've already gone past the 9. But yeah, form and function all in one package. The deck itself is gorgeous, is beautiful, is usable, it's practical. But the book as well is really quite good. It's also, you know, it's a lovely little hardback thing, which I just think is lovely. We've got color illustrations throughout. It's also beautiful. But it's also just a really good little guidebook. It's kind of a little white book, like an elevated little white book. There's nothing too superfluous here. We get straight into the card meanings. There's a couple of pages of spreads after we finish the card meanings. So there we go, from the Fool on page 8 to the King of Coins on page 169. And then there's a couple of pages of spreads and about the artist, and that's it. Like there's no fluff, no filler. Card meanings themselves are good. They reference the sort of traditional meaning. They reference the changes that the artist has made in either the like images or just in his interpretation of the cards. It's really usable. It's always such a joy to pull this deck out because it's just such a good deck. I enjoy it very much. So that is the Fyodor Pavlov for my Venus in Virgo pick. And then finally, we have the Ten of Pentacles, which is Mercury in Virgo. And because Mercury is the ruler, the planetary ruler of Virgo, Mercury is both in domicile, which just means it's at home in Virgo because it rules the sign, and it's also exalted in Virgo. So it's like doing its best work in its most comfortable place. And the Ten of Pentacles card depicts wealth and abundance. Legacy is often a keyword that I like for the Ten of Pentacles. And I think that Mercury in Virgo likes to be engaged in meaningful work, and especially work that has practical, tangible results. So in the, for instance, the Rider-Waite-Smith Ten of Pentacles, we can see that kind of generational wealth as an expression of that kind of practical, tangible result of hard work is you're securing your family's future, for instance. And so that's all very well and good. I'm thinking, okay, so now I just need to find a deck that organizes and communicates for abundance, which is not exactly what I found because I think that's a tricky description. The deck that I've pulled as my 10 of Pentacles, Mercury in Virgo pick is the Next World Tarot. So like I've said, the 10 of Pentacles always brings up ideas of like legacy for me, but also community. I think those are themes of like legacy and community are themes that are totally like front and center in this deck. The introduction to this deck itself describes it as a tool for magic, and the magician is Mercury. And actually the magician is here. The magician always represents Mercury, but in this deck in particular, it's also associated with Virgo. So it feels extra perfect that I've pulled this for the Mercury in Virgo pick. It's a tool for change. It's talking about themes of like decolonizing the stories of those who came before us. It talks about dismantling systems of oppression, systems of patriarchy and white supremacy, and those themes of like transformation and like transition into, I guess, a next world. That's also very mercurial to my mind. That kind of transmutation thing where substances like transform from, like, for instance, like a gas to a liquid to a solid. Mercury does that, like the actual physical metal Mercury does that idea of like transformation between states. This deck feels like that. So this is my Mercury in Virgo pick as a deck that is somewhat associated with those ideas of like legacy and community in the Ten of Pentacles. And then, of course, all those ideas of like change and mutability. So there we have it, the Next World Tarot for the 10 of Pentacles for Mercury in Virgo. And with that, we're now halfway through this series. I've done 6 of these. We've done Aries to Virgo. We're halfway through. Next up is Libra. Libra is my sun sign. Libra is also now my rising sign, now that I have my correct birth time. This one feels like a big deal to me. Although, like I say, I do have a soft spot in my heart for Virgo because I thought I was a Virgo rising for years. Let me know what you thought of my picks. And if you're a Virgo or you have Virgo placements, let me know if you approve of my choices, if you feel like they represented Virgo accurately. Let me know what you're working with this Virgo season, and come back next month for my Libra picks. Thank you so much for being here, for spending some time with me. Give me a like if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, all that good stuff. There is a link to my Patreon in the description if you want to come join us over there or hang out in the Tarot Lab, especially if you like the blending of tarot and astrology. I do a fair bit of that over on Patreon. So all of that is linked below. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.